Some things are hard to break. Like FX versus DX, right? Quick little story. Have you ever drank this stuff before? Oh my god, this stuff is just awesome, man. It's not full of chemicals, it's just San Pellegrino mineral water and real orange juice and carbon dioxide. Ooh, god, that's really good. That'll really stick hair on your hot dog. Crop sensors. Oh, that wasn't nice. Crop sensors. I know a lot of you know this already, so don't roll your eyes too hard, because a lot of people don't really understand this, and it confuses them. And it's understandable. I mean, almost every photographer out there doesn't take cameras apart, or generally speaking, you know how they work, but the only thing to remember is that every camera on Earth, every lens on Earth ever made operates exactly the same way. It doesn't matter if it's a Contax, a Zeiss, a Leica lens, a Fuji lens, a Sony lens. Sony doesn't make lenses. Zeiss makes them for Sony. Every lens is exactly the same way. They drop the exact same light, irrespective of what's underneath them. I keep encountering this issue, and it's kind of hard to, because there's another YouTube photography channel that talks about, ignorantly, the depth of field changing. When you stick the exact same, like an FX lens on a DX camera, nothing changes. Now, if you zoom your feet differently, you know, to get the exact same field of view, then duh, of course the depth of field changes. The point being is that if you have two cameras, FX and DX, and one lens between them, and your feet are glued to the floor, you switch lenses from the full frame to the crop sensor, what happens? Nothing happens. Sure, something happens. Crop is a crop is a crop is a crop. What's a crop? Crop. It's like, now you're gonna think this is when I was calibrating my printer. This is a crappy image it's actually not overexposed, the image that I took, but anyway, it's a piece of junk test image that it turned out too light because of my printer. It's running out of ink. Here's what a crop sensor does. Yeah, okay, so except better. So what's the difference between this image and the image I had before I cut this? What's the difference? Answer is there's no difference, except it's cropped. Every lens on Earth, doesn't matter if it's a super autofocus, whatever the hell it is, most advanced light, they all drop the same light with absolutely zero regard for the sensor that's underneath them. Nothing changes. Depth of field does not change. Nothing changes. Crop. Crop's a crop. This is what happens. What got cropped? Did anything occur at the lens, or you know what the lens was pooping out inside the camera? Nothing. What happens is you have a smaller sensor. It was cropping out. Yeah. Smaller sensor was cropping out this, and of course lenses don't emit squares of light or rectangles of light. Obviously they emit circles of light. A lot of people don't know that, which is fine. It's okay not to know stuff. It's good to know, learn something new every day, right? I'm sorry if this video seems very pedestrian to some people, but I've noticed a lot of this stuff coming up recently. You know what? How's the depth of field on that lens when I throw it on a crop sensor? It's like nothing changes. What do you mean depth of field doesn't change? Regis and Kathy Lee said it changed. You know what I'm talking about? Nothing changes. Nothing. Every lens on Earth ever made, whether it's film camera, digital camera, Fujifilm, Contax, like, they all crap out the same light out of their little butt right back here, out of the rear element. Nothing changes. The only thing that changes is crop, and how the image is processed by that particular camera, meaning it's SNR, it's native gain. That's all signal processing. It's kind of like, you know, two twins, except they both wear glasses, but one twin's not wearing glasses, and so it doesn't process the image as well. Same sort of premise, but that's camera side. Nothing changes as far as depth of field, nothing. Nothing changes. How the image is handled and processed, like obviously, if there were, which I have the medium format, let's say I did the medium format version of this, which of course is the GFX. It has better SNR. I can actually take, not these lenses, but I could take like a full frame Fuji lens and stick it on the GFX or stick it on this camera. The same, the same Nikkor lens, and stick it on the GFX with an adapter and use an adapter and stick that same Nikkor lens on this. It'll have better micro contrast, better tone, saturation on the GFX because the image that is dropped out is handled better. Better handling. Kind of like when you order something from some place that doesn't package the stuff that you bought very well. Poor handling. So, yeah, the smaller photo sites. But that's the camera side. So, I'm sorry that I had to make this video for anybody else that's rolling their eyeballs, but I've noticed a lot of people commenting on it recently, asking me the question. It's like, well, maybe it's not very clear, because there are some other YouTube channels out there that do give inaccurate information on the fact that lenses don't change depth of field or anything else when you stick them on another camera. They all drop the same light. How it's cropped and how it's handled is something different, but depth of field doesn't change, nothing. Field of view doesn't change either. That's something else people are confused. Like, well, what's the field of view when you stick a full-frame camera? When you stick a 50mm on a crop sensor camera, how does the field of view change? Here's a trick question. What happens when you stick... This is a trick question for a lot of you advanced people. What happens when you stick a 50mm full-frame lens and stick that same 50mm on a crop sensor camera like this? What happens? What happens? Because this is a 50mm lens too. But of course it's an FX. What happens? Does the field of view change? Nope. Sure it does. Because that's the equivalent of a 75mm when you stick it on it. No, the field of view doesn't change. The only thing that changes is, because remember, every lens drops the exact same light. A 50mm is a 50mm is a 50mm is a 50mm. It matters not what camera you stick it on. How is a 50mm if Fuji made a micro 4/3 camera, which they don't, and you stuck that 50mm on a micro 4/3 camera? What changes on field of view? The field of view doesn't change. Well, sure it does. It's like it's like a 75mm on a crop sensor camera. No, field of view doesn't change as far as what the lens drops. What changes is the relative field of view from what is cropped out of the circle of projection. The circle of projection on a 50mm is going to be a 50mm. And it's always going to be a 50mm, ever was a 50mm, regardless of what sensor is underneath it. The field of view on a 50mm lens is always 50mm, or any other focal. Nothing changes. I would love to see somebody try to protest that. I bet someone is going to leave it. Yeah, sure it does change. Because no, it doesn't change. You see, there's nothing in any lens ever made, whether it's super electronic lens or like an old lens like this, nothing changes. A 50 is always a 50 is always a 50. The field of view is due to this, the crop. The actual field of view is the same. This is where we're talking about compression too. You feel me? No. I think that was really simple, and yet someone is still going to be confused. If you can remember one thing, that every lens, if you say something kind of silly, everybody remembers it. Every lens craps out the same light regardless. The same field of view, the same light. Everything else is how the camera crops it and how it processes it. Yep. I thought that was pretty simple. Someone is still going to be confused. Bye.